I think something that we should be scared about is to end up in a world where only a few companies are able to do AI. I think that would be a very scary dystopian world. Open source, which is basically the ability to share models, to share data sets openly, is a way to fight these natural tendencies. We believe that you can create a world where not just a few organizations are able to build and dominate, but really any organization, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of little tech, of startups, of non-profits, of governments should be able to build with AI.
Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with Clem Delangue, and he is the co-founder and CEO of Hugging Face, which is basically like AI GitHub, pretty much.
Yes.
Let's start off with, what is that little robot in the center there?
Yeah, this is a Richie Mini. Mm-hmm. This is a open source desktop robot for AI builders that we introduced a few months ago. Already over 5,000 people pre-ordered it, and we starting to ship these little buddies all over the world.
Are you already shipping them?
Yes, we're starting to ship them. I received mine actually last week. It's fully open source. Most of it is you can 3D print and fully programmable, meaning that it doesn't come so much with pre-installed apps. As an AI builder, you can build your apps yourself and then use these apps that you build at home for you. For example, a lot of people are using them with their kids. Playing hide and seek with their kids, red light, green light with their kids, and also you can share them with the community. So we hope that the AI builders all over the world are gonna build apps for these with the latest AI models, with the latest open source models, and share them with the world.
How did you kind of make the decision to do something a little bit smaller as the first robot that you guys would ship instead of like a full-on humanoid robot or something much bigger?
Yeah, so at Hugging Face, we're kind of like the platform for AI builders, right? We have 11 million AI builders using our platform. And a year and a half ago, we started to see kind of like more and more AI builders playing with robotics, right? And one of the challenges that they were encountering is the lack of affordable hardware for them to experiment with. Right?
And is this the whole situation where like the early entry bots are like $20,000 or much more?
Exactly. I feel like when an AI builder is starting with robotics, they might not want to buy a $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 robot. And so that's why we decided to build this affordable robots. We sell it for $400 to $500, right? So it's very cheap. So that it's easy for you to take a decision to buy it, put it next to your laptop, and start experimenting with open source AI robotics.
Like tinkering?
Exactly, yeah.
What role do you kind of see tinkering playing and how these types of things are developed?
I think it's the most important thing. It's one of the most impactful things that you can help with in AI right now, because AI has very strong kind of like natural tendencies of concentration of capabilities, right? I think there's a strong probability of a future where only a few companies are able to do AI, and the rest of us are kind of like doomed just to be AI users, not really AI builders. And I think that's something we should be worried about and that we should try to change. So everything that we're building at Hugging Face, we're always thinking, okay, how can it help make more people AI builders, thinkers themselves, learn, experiment. And so that's one of the reasons why we're excited by Richie Mini and in general by open source, of course.
How do you think something like that is going to evolve? Are you going to basically build the first version, get it into a bunch of people's hands? You said, 5,000 or so people have already bought it. What are you looking to get back, even as far as people just using it and working out the kinks?
So first, we're super excited about people building apps, right? We feel like if thousands of AI builders are starting to build with this robot, there's going to be kind of like an explosion of capabilities, right? Especially in the AI field where there are new models, new capabilities every day. We hope that ultimately all these capabilities will translate almost instantly to robotics, right? I was mentioning before, next time the next Gemini model is out, the next GPT model is out, the next Anthropic model is out, people should be able to build their robotics apps right away, right? Gemini 3 is out. Look at the new capabilities of my robot. Now we can read my book. Now we can recognize these objects. Now we can teach my kids about this new topic that it wasn't able to teach before. So I'm really excited to see what people are going to build, not just when they receive their robot, but also as the field evolves.
Yeah.
So that's on the software side, on the platform side. And then on the hardware side, because the goal of Richie Mini is to be open source, we hope that people are not just going to assemble their own robots. So when they're going to receive it, it's not going to be assembled. So they'd have to assemble it
A little
themselves.
bit like the IKEA Lego set sort of situation.
Exactly. For me, it took me 5 hours to actually build my Richie Mini when I received it. And what we are expecting is people not only to build it themselves, assemble it themselves, but also to improve it themselves, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing when we're shipping it, people who are putting Richie Mini on wheels, right? Or people who are adding grippers or hands to Richie Mini. People who are improving the motors, right? So yeah, we hope to see really cool developments driven by the community, not so much driven by us, but driven by the community, both on the software side and on the hardware side.
Hugging Face did not start off as kind of like this AI GitHub platform. And I certainly would not have expected a year and a half ago that you guys were building robots or trying to ship a bunch of robots. What kind of like guides you when you're making decisions on where to take the company?
We really kind of like driven by the community, right? Where we feel like we can have an impact, unleash some community power to the world. And that's actually how we became kind of like the GitHub for AI. When we started the company, we were doing some sort of Tamagotchi AI, kind of like a conversational AI, kind of like a ChatGPT, but before ChatGPT.
And this was like 2016, 2017-ish.
Exactly. Yeah, it was quite a long time ago now. And then and one day I remember quite vividly. It was a Friday. One of our co-founders, Thomas Wolf, told Julien and us and me, like the other co-founders, I've seen kind of like Google releasing this model called BERT, which was kind of like the first popular transformer models, but they released it in TensorFlow, and most of the community right now is using PyTorch, right? So I feel like it would be useful for the community if we ported BERT from TensorFlow to PyTorch, right? And at the time, Julien and I were like, okay, yeah, let's do it to see if the community is interested, if it's useful to the community. And so Thomas worked whole weekend, and on Monday he tweeted about the release of PyTorch pre-trained BERT, right? Which was like the BERT port in PyTorch. And we got like 1,000 likes on Twitter at the time, which us
must have been a huge thing.
For us, it's like, we broke the internet. What happened? Why are so many people liking this? But the truth is, it was useful to the community, right? And then after that, like the following few weeks, people and researchers started to add their models to what we created, right? At the time, it was the team doing GPT, right? The very first version of GPT that was open source. It was the people who are now doing Mistral, that were doing at the time a model called ExcelNet. And a bunch of other researchers started to add their models to our repository. And then people started to kind of like use that as a source for their models. So that was kind of like the early innings of what we are today, like the platform for AI builders. So right from the start, we've really been driven by the community, you know, and not only driven, but really that's the community that made us what we are, and really propelled our success. Because if you think of it, if you look at us at the time, you know, the founders, we were 3 random French guys, you know, without much network, without much spatial access to any kind of network or any kind of organization, and it's really the community that made us who we are, and multiplied a little bit some of the initiatives that we started. So we're really grateful, and that's why when we're thinking about anything we're doing, we're always thinking, okay, how can this benefit the community? Because that's really who made us who we are.
What have been the biggest points where you foregoed kind of making money or like early monetization opportunities in order to kind of build a culture of just helping builders?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the platform, the Hugging Face platform is, 99% free, right? And we try to kind of like build a model that fosters that, right? When you think about kind of like doing good in the world, I tend to try not to trust too much people, but instead trust the systems and the incentives. So for us, one thing we always thought about is how you can build a company or a system with incentives for us to do good, right? We built Hugging Face in a way that if we're making open source more popular as a platform for open source, we're going to do well as a company, as founders. And so I think it creates and it aligns the incentives for us to keep doing well, right? I think a lot of founders or companies sometimes do this mistake where they probably want to do good, right? But they end up building systems where it's not really rewarded for them to do good, or sometimes it's almost kind of like a force to fight. Right?
It's like basically betting against human nature, almost.
Yeah. Like for example, some of these companies, when they're building APIs for AI that they monetize, right? And they get kind of like into this race where the more money they make with their APIs, right, the more money they can invest into training, and you get into this race that I think at the end kind of like makes it very difficult for you to, not kind of like give in into this kind of like motivation to make more and more money, and to focus more and more on API, on closed source, not sharing, and all of that. And so I think for us, it's always been important to try to create a system with aligned incentives so that we continue to really double down on our mission, which is to make AI more open source, more available to anyone, to turn as many people into AI builders as possible. While kind of like being successful.
Did you do anything in the early days that was kind of unusual to find employees that were very culturally aligned and like mission aligned?
Yeah, we have a bit of a unusual structure at Hugging Face because we obviously kind of like distributed all over the world. But also we have a lot of function that are distributed all over the company. So we have very little kind of like talent teams, HR teams, community management teams.
Are you trying to maintain like a pretty flat org structure?
Yeah, but also we're trying to make it so that it's everyone's responsibilities to hire, everyone's responsibilities to communicate on social media, to interact with the community. So for example, our social accounts, we don't have someone who's responsible for them as a community manager. Anyone from the team can tweet from the Hugging Face Twitter account. And that creates kind of like a distribution of responsibilities that shows everyone that it's their responsibilities to interact with the community. And it's the same for hiring, right? We don't want to have kind of like HR or talent teams in charge of hiring. We want every single team member to think, okay, who are some great people in the world that would love to work with? And then reach out to them directly and tell them, hey, dude, you should join us. You should come to Hugging Face. And that's something that's worked really, really well for us. I think today, a lot of companies, especially big technology companies, they really specialize people in a way, right? And they put people in boxes. They're like, okay, you're going to be a software engineer and you're going to write code, right? You're going to be a marketer and you're going to market. You're going to be like a PR person and you're going to do PR.
It's a little bit like they're looking through a specific lens on just their thing and not like a broader view of the company.
Yeah. And they're kind of like forcing you to only do that, which is, in my opinion, quite boring. And doesn't really help you to grow not only as a worker but as a human being. So for us, we're taking a little bit of a different approach where we believe everyone is able to do technical work. Everyone is able to communicate. Everyone is able to hire, right? And we rather try to kind of like hire generalists and kind of like help them do all of that. And I think it's been really good to us because it also brings kind of like new perspectives to each kind of like line of work. When you have kind of like an engineer who is trying to hire themselves instead of kind of like a talent team, they come with different ideas, right? Different ways to attract people, different ways to filter people, different ways to hire people. And the other way around is true too, right? When you have someone who has maybe less coding experience, less engineering experience, starting to think about how to build a product, they come up with different ideas and different perspectives. And I think it's also been really, really good to develop everyone at Hugging Face as human beings, right? To be exposed to more things, to have kind of like a variety of experiences in terms of functions, in terms of countries, in terms of missions. So we really like this approach, and that's something that we want to keep doing in the future.
What kind of serendipity has come from that sort of model where you're kind of outsourcing decision making to the frontline warrior?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was mentioning kind of like even if it was not at the beginning, this founding story of Thomas, being like, okay, there's something completely different that what we've been doing so far, right? With like this BERT release, and I want to port it to PyTorch. I think in a normal organization, maybe people would have been like, what are you talking about? It's not at all what we're doing. It's
ideas
not
would have been shut down too quickly.
Yeah. And not kind of like because people are bad, but just kind of like you become so focused on something that you try to over-index on kind of like limiting distractions and things like that. But our culture allowed us to be just like, if you think it's exciting, if you think it's going to be useful for the community, if it's going to be impactful, just go do it. and we'll see later if it works, and it did work. So I think a lot of these initiatives are made possible thanks to this culture. Richie Mini is a good example too. I mean, I think a normal company with a normal culture probably wouldn't have done it,
yeah.
right? But for us, it's just kind of like the community is excited about it. We're starting to see AI builders, and we have team members who are excited about the topic. So just experiment with it, build it, and see if it works. And it does work.
A little bit like the IKEA design, where you feel more attached to the furniture because you go choose it out, and then you are forced to actually spend time screwing in each bolt and putting it together. Do you think that that kind of creates the right sort of mentality when someone is first opening the box and thinking about getting the Richie Mini in the first place?
Absolutely. I think there's a certain joy of building.
Yeah.
People don't always kind of like realize it, but really kind of like building things yourself the way you want them to be built, being active in the world and co-creating something brings a lot of joy to people. It certainly does to me, right? As a founder, building is one of the greatest joys that I experience. And so when you give them kind of like a tool, a platform, something to build, they enjoy it very much. And so when we think about Richie Mini, we think a lot about how not just enabling people to use it, right? Using it is great, but if you think of it, there are many devices that you can use, but how we can use that as a way for people to build and experience this joy of building. So that's the first thing. It creates joy for people, and then it creates urgency for them to kind of like program it the way they want to program it, right? I think some of our diverse backgrounds and the fact that we're coming from, I think, all over the world taught us that, people don't want the same thing everywhere, right? And we've always felt like that it would be kind of like dangerous if only a few people in Silicon Valley would decide what to build.
Dictating the direction of the future, sort of thing.
Exactly, right. And so I think by making people more builders, you actually give them agency and you give them a choice in deciding what to build. And I think that's tremendously important as a society, for humanity, that when you think about the future of AI, that people get to decide what AI is going to be used for, right? And, maybe some people will want AI to be built for chatbots, maybe for, social media, video creations, right? But I think also a lot of people will want to create kind of like different things, things that improve their life, things that are useful for education, for science. And they'll want to build it kind of like in their own way, right? Like we have Richie Mini in my house right now, being able to film, right? So for me, for example, I want Richie Mini to run locally. I want like the data that is gotten, that is collected by Richie Mini to stay on my laptop and on Richie Mini, because I don't want to send this information to any other company. It's my house. It's my private space. So I think giving also the ability for people to build will kind of like allow them to decide how this technology is built and create some granularity and diversity on the way it's built. And you're going to have some options where sometimes AI is going to run locally stay on your hardware, stay on your laptop. Sometimes you're gonna go through APIs. Sometimes you're gonna kind of like call some LLM providers like OpenAI and Anthropic. But at least when you participate in the building yourself, you can choose, and you can end up with a solution that you feel most comfortable about, instead of kind of like having to accept
locked into some
that,
ecosystem.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I know Steve Jobs has this line where he's like, focus is saying no. What paths could you have gone down where you actively chose not to go down them?
Well, there's been, for example, as kind of like the proprietary APIs, LLMs emerged, of course, there was this kind of like possibility of going that direction, right? We have a very good science team that is training kind of like good, smaller open source models, right? And we could have said, okay, now we're gonna build larger proprietary models, right? Because it looks like a lot of people are starting to do that. We decided not to do that because, again, as I was mentioning before, we felt like it wouldn't create the right incentives for us, right? I think if you start to commercialize models, the incentives to do more open source are a bit more blurry. There's always been a lot of kind of like interest from our community for us to do also more compute solutions, more cloud ourselves, which we haven't done a lot yet. We've rather decided to partner with the cloud providers. So we're partnering with AWS, with Azure, with Google Cloud, with a lot of inference providers on the Hugging Face platform like Fireworks, Grok, Together, and a lot of these startups. This more because we felt like there was some people doing it well. And so whenever we feel like there are some people doing it well, usually we don't try to compete just to compete, but rather try to focus on the things that are not handled yet by the community right now, and not kind of like reinvent the wheel there. So for example, on compute, we've mostly been partnering with people instead of kind of like building our own compute solutions.
I know, there are aspects of a business where you decide that's not our area of expertise. We want different incentives. We're going to go down a different path. There's also been like companies like Google and Facebook and these other types of businesses that try to compete with you, and yet they have different incentive structures in their own organizations. And so they couldn't really build the same type of environment that you've created.
Yeah.
What has that kind of been like for building your own semi-moat around this? Like incentive structure?
It's been super fun, right? Because we've seen two phases for AI, right? We've seen kind of like the early phase where AI was really niche, right? When I started working on AI, we weren't even calling it AI, right? At the time, we were talking about computer vision, chatbots, and we weren't even calling it AI. And it was quite niche, right? And the second phase is when AI became much more mainstream, right? Everyone building with AI. And it's always been like very, very competitive, right? With a lot of players. And Hugging Face being kind of like the central community, central platform. We've always had kind of like a lot of people trying to replicate what we've been doing. I think if you think about, model zoos or model repositories, there's been maybe like 50 at least startups and big companies trying to do that in their products, all the way from Google doing the TensorFlow hub, obviously Meta, Amazon, Microsoft, all the way to kind of like every smaller startup at some point trying to replicate what Hugging Face has been. The beauty of I think what we building is that it's very independent, right? So it's very neutral. Like we're not going to kind of like push a specific model, a specific data set, specific provider, we always kind of like going to try to provide you with any model that you can think of, and really let you choose, right? So right now there's over 6 million models, data sets, and apps on Hugging Face. There's a new repository that is created every 8 seconds. So the volume of contributions is insane. And so we've reached kind of like this scale where it doesn't really make sense to go to any other platform or to start any other platform. Because if you think of it, after one day, like another platform, you'd be so behind in terms of kind of like the numbers of models, because in a day there's been kind of like a few thousand new models, new data sets, new apps on Hugging Face. And so we've reached kind of like this scale for a platform, a bit similarly to what we've seen with GitHub, right? Where I think we have quite a strong network effect and quite a strong moat, where it's gonna be really hard for someone else to do exactly what we do, which is a nice position to be in, of course.
For companies like this, it kind of reminds me of Reddit, where the beginning of Reddit, Alexis Ohanian and Steve Huffman were just basically they were creating fake accounts, or, they had like the admin sign up and then the normal sign up. And if you signed up normally, you just create an account and then you'd post from your account. And they had a special thing where every time they posted, they do like create a new user. And that was the first, I don't know how many months of Reddit was just them pretending that there was a lot more activity on the platform than there actually was. But with a lot of these types of companies where it is like a community driven business, it just takes a very long time. And so for the first 6 years of your guys' company, there's like not a huge amount of like revenue, and it's just like a slow, almost, I wouldn't say slog, but it's just a slow progression. And then at some point you just kind of like build this thing that's not easily replicable. It just takes a long time to build. What was it like for the first, 5-6 years before the creation of ChatGPT?
Yeah, you're totally right. It's a different kind of business. It's a different kind of product where you want to create kind of like the foundations. You want to make these foundations very stable. You want to foster the network effects for quite a long time. And also you want to build the trust with the community for quite a long time. I feel like if we're doing what we're doing just for 6 months and for a year, for even 2 years, I think people wouldn't trust us as much as they do now. I feel like time builds kind of like stronger trust with the community, where if they've seen that you've been doing that, for a few years, and that you didn't try to take advantage of them, you didn't try to do a rug pull on them, you didn't fuck up, or you didn't go out of business, I think that's when they start trusting the platform enough to really kind of like invest more and more of their time and resources on the platform and share more models, share more data sets, share more applications than they're building on the platform. So I think it's really important, and it's kind of like one of the kind of like characteristics of these kinds of product and companies that you can't fake or you can't accelerate. So I think if you're building these kinds of companies as founders, you have to make peace with it. And you have, again, we were talking about alignment of incentives. You have to build such platform in alignment with your values and what you're excited about, so that you can, stay excited during these years of building and not get distracted by other people's maybe faster success, right? Like it's really easy in AI right now to get distracted by another company where you look at the cursor, you look at the company like that, and you're like, oh my God,
They're
went
growing revenue so fast.
From zero to $1 billion in revenue in a year and a half. You can be like, I'm gonna stop everything I'm doing and I'm gonna do that, right? But if you believe in what you're doing, if you enjoy what you're doing, if you feel like what you're doing matters, you can kind of like ignore that, and not chase these kinds of things, which, comes with their own sets of constraints, challenges, like I've met a lot of people, successful, not successful, some in this rocket ship, some completely failing, some kind of like more linear growth. And what always was striking to me is that their level of happiness and enjoyment is not necessarily correlated to the scenario they're in. Usually it's more correlated to how aligned what they're doing is with their values, their excitement, and their kind of like life mission. So for us, because we're so excited about open source, about really kind of like enabling anyone to become AI builders, I feel like if it took a year, if it took 10 years, if it took 50 years, it doesn't really matter as much, because we're really enjoying what we're building. We feel like we're growing. We feel like we're having a positive impact in the world. So really enjoying the journey, no matter the destination, in a way.
I love this line from Charlie Munger where he says, trust is the most powerful economic force in the world.
Yeah.
How did you kind of come to the conclusion that trust was the right thing to optimize for?
Well, I mean, first, like, we're really grateful and lucky. I think we're probably one of the companies in the world that AI builders love the most. I think you can go talk to any AI builders. There's going to be very, very few who don't love Hugging Face, which is something really important to us and kind of like an incredible validation to us. I think it all comes down from what I was sharing in the beginning, our feeling that, frankly, we're kind of like random people with no special rights to win or to be successful in a way. And that's really the trust of the community that made us who we are. And so it feels very natural for us to focus on that and keep kind of like fueling this trust and kind of like try to make the community proud and try to kind of like for them to be happy and for us to be impactful and useful to them. So we don't think about it too much. I feel like it's more kind of like a natural part of how we think about things.
I think basically every single great founder looks up to some. I love John D. Rockefeller and like the robber barons of the 19th, 20th century. Who's kind of like the role model for you when you're building your company?
It's a good question. We've been inspired by a lot of products, right? Of course, kind of like GitHub. We talk a lot about GitHub. We feel like the impact in the world of GitHub is really kind of like underappreciated, right? If you think of the numbers of developers, I think it's 150 million developers now that are using GitHub, and kind of like the power of open source that it unleashed into the world. It's really amazing. Right. And so that kind of things are really kind of like an inspiration for us. Then when it comes to me, I'm a big fan of philosophy. And so I have a lot of philosopher inspirations.
Who are your favorites?
My favorite book is The Sisyphus Myth by Albert Camus. French philosopher. Obviously, I'm French, so I'm biased. But I feel like they have a lot of lessons that can be applicable to entrepreneurship. So the Sisyphus myth is, this guy Sisyphus that's been cursed to push this rock up a mountain, right? And each time the rock reaches the top, it basically falls down, and he has to start all over again, right, for eternity, right? And in kind of like popular culture, it's been a little bit kind of like defined as a curse, right? Something really bad. But the conclusion of the book and the last sentence of the book is you have to picture Sisyphus happy, right? Despite kind of like the hard, repetitive, kind of like meaningless task, Sisyphus is happy. And the reason why is because, his goal and his happiness doesn't come so much from reaching the top or staying at the top, or from having kind of like a higher God, right? The whole philosophy of absurdism from Camus is that you don't really need a God or heaven or some sort of kind of like higher power, because kind of like the task itself of kind of like pushing yourself, the task itself of pushing the rock. I imagine Sisyphus why he's pushing, of like observing, oh, it's funny, look at this mountain, it's beautiful, maybe there's a sunset, maybe there's a sunrise. Just kind of like the task itself can be joyful for him. And it's the same thing for entrepreneurs. If you think of it, of course you have the motivation of the success, right, of getting there, of building a great company, but also there's the joy of building your company, right? Hiring great team members, experimenting with new projects, releasing things. We were talking about the joy of building like Rich Mini. I'm really inspired by that. I think that's one potential recipe, not only for happiness, but also for the name of the podcast is obviously Relentless, right? And I think to be relentless, you can challenge, you can channel some of that, right? Like if you really align your happiness with the grind, with the hustle, with the building, more than the outcome, I think you'll become much more relentless, because it's gonna be harder to make you give up. Like
the way I think about Sisyphus is, he pushes the rock up the hill and then it rolls back down, and then every time he pushes it back up, it's just a little bit. If you do it right, it's basically a little bit more of your rock. You get to decide what kind of rock you're pushing up the hill. Yeah. And life is just the endless journey of pushing the rock up the hill.
Of course.
And if you do it right, you enjoy every day more and more.
Yeah, because you get more agency, you get more freedom, you get more realization, right? Like you align more and more what you're doing, what you're building with your essence, or like who you feel you are. And so you grow this joy, this happiness. There's one philosopher that did a little bit of a variation of that. His name is Clem Delangue, like a French philosopher. And his theory that also I find kind of like interesting is that basically joy comes from the gap between the meaninglessness of the world and the enjoyment that you can find in it. So he's saying, for example, you look at a beautiful sunset, you look at, a robot that you built, or kind of like a company that you built. Maybe it's kind of like vain or meaningless. There's no really kind of like higher reason or higher purpose for it. But for some reason you look at it and you feel joy, right? And his theory is that it's kind of like he calls it la force majeure, like the major force that drives you. It's kind of like this gap between the meaninglessness or like the vanity of some of the things in the world and the joy that you can find in them. Whereas, like if you work on something that is kind of like extremely meaningful in a way, you find joy, but your kind of like rational mind understands why you find joy, and so it doesn't really drive you as much in terms of force. It's very, very interesting theory and very interesting philosopher too.
Yeah, I think of kind of like any great company as like a living embodiment of the soul of the founder. And so if you think of like an Uber, there was this moment where I remember Travis Kalanick said like, I am Uber.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people took from that and they're like, oh, that's like arrogant or strange. And I'm like, no, I think, this person basically spent, what was that? Almost 10 years, basically just pouring their soul and their lifeblood into the thing.
Yeah.
And it gave it meaning to him. And then also your ability to create something valuable is just a set of actions over time. And
it should be, because I see a lot of startups and founders, especially first-time founders, who start a company, start something. It doesn't even have to be a company, it can be a project, right? And they see some sort of kind of like initial traction, initial success, and for some reason, usually when they start the company, they don't think so much about, what's going to make me successful. They think more about, what I enjoy doing, how I enjoy doing it. And then when it starts to get some success, some traction, their mind plays a game with them and they start thinking, okay, what should I do to be more successful?
To continue on this, keep getting a bigger number.
Yeah. And they start thinking much more about what they should do instead of what they would like to do. And many founders end up creating a company or an organization that actually they don't end up liking working for. Or
they wake up one morning and it's almost like a monster.
Yeah. It happens a lot in startups. I have many friends, many people, many founders, many CEOs who, for a few years started thinking more about what they should do, what people were telling them to do to grow, to scale, to build a successful company. And then one day they wake up and they're like, actually, the company that I built, I don't really enjoy building it anymore. It's not really fulfilling any of my needs, any of my happiness, any of my excitement. And usually that's when they quit. Right? That's when they quit. They hire like an older CEO or like, and it's usually bad news for the company because it's harder. It's harder after that to grow. So when I talk to founders, my most common advice is to tell them, okay, focus on building what you enjoy building. What you're excited to build. Talk to your co-founders and think, okay, are we excited about this direction? Do we feel like we can wake up every morning for 5 years focusing on that? Or is that more something that we feel like we have to do because investors are telling me to do, or some people are telling me to do, or I have this fake image of what a big company is, and I feel like I have to do that to make it as a big company? And instead, focusing on, what you're excited about, what you want to build, what you feel like is useful for the world. And that's how, companies become kind of like a reflection and stays kind of like reflection of the founders that are building them.
There's this line from Jeff Bezos where he says, most decisions in life are basically two-way doors where you can kind of go through it and then decide by taking action. You go through the door, decide, how do I feel about this, the results of this action? And most of the time you can just walk back through. Some of them are one-way doors, but that's very rare. In my life, most of my guiding principle or something is basically going through, just taking action, taking a few steps down the path, and then just seeing how I feel. And if I don't like it, just walking a few steps back and going in a different direction, and then doing that a couple times until I find something that feels right. For you, has there been any moment where you kind of walked down a path and then just decided to turn around and say, I want to go do something different?
All the time. Like one of the things I'm trying to do is every week to at least do kind of like one experiment that if I think too much about it, I wouldn't do them, but kind of like, less randomness, let kind of like my excitement for something drive me to do something I wouldn't do otherwise. And most of them, after I walk back from them, you pointed something I think really important, which is to follow kind of like more your excitement and your guts more than your rational minds. Sometimes it's something that I've been kind of like working on quite a lot. For example, I always resisted the urge of doing to-do lists. I don't have like an assistant.
Why did you decide to hold off on that?
Because the reason is, for me, I suspect that a lot of people, and me included, when you start kind of like rationalizing things too much and kind of like put things rationally into to-do lists and try to do kind of like everything that you're supposed to do or that you should do, you end up kind of like not spending as much time on the things that you're excited about, that your gut telling you to do. I think there's some magic and some beauty in people's minds, in the sense that if something is important and exciting enough for you to do, you'll remember to do it. You don't need a to-do list. If you need something to be on a to-do list, it probably means you shouldn't do it, or you shouldn't do it now. It's a little bit the same with assistants, right? I think a lot of people are getting assistants to help them, schedule meetings,
managing stuff
research,
that they don't genuinely want to do.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And whereas kind of like, in my opinion, if you don't have time to do something, probably you just shouldn't do it, right? It means it's not exciting, impactful enough for you to do it, right? And there's some sort of kind of like a magic for doing things yourself, as kind of like it makes you also so much more efficient, right? Like for example, you and I, right? How we schedule this interview. I feel like if I had an assistant, maybe they would have taken kind of like a few days. Okay, can you do that day? Can you do that day? What should we do as a setup? Versus, how it happened is, I got excited. I was like, okay, that's a good idea. Okay, can you come that day? Yes, let's do it at my house. And things become kind of like easy, right? And simple. So that's one of my interesting learnings. Sometimes by avoiding kind of like complexity, you actually can do more and kind of like keep your life actually more aligned with what you're excited about, instead of kind of like pushing too far into what you should do.
Jeff Bezos had a meeting with one of his executives. It must have been semi-early in Amazon's history, where the executive came to him and said that he was like hugely jammed and there was just too much stuff going on and he wasn't like doing the things that he loved.
Yeah.
And I remember Bezos saying to him that basically it's your job. You're the top of the organization. It's your job to figure out what you should be doing and what you genuinely want to do. And then basically find the people that can support you in doing that. And it's like, it's your failure if you haven't done that over time. How have you kind of figured out what parts of the business are the thing? Like for me, I have to be sitting in this chair. Like it's something that I get to do. I'm really happy to do it. Yeah. There's all these other parts of the podcast and making this type of production happen that it's not something I genuinely enjoy doing. But it also, I can go find people that are the best in the world at those things and kind of fill my gaps. For you, what's that been like, where you're like, this is the thing that I love. Yeah. All these other areas I don't love, I'm going to go find those people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I always try to think about, how can I add value, add impact, and kind of like do something kind of like 10 times better than anyone else could do, and try to focus on these, right? Like when there's something where I feel like, I can't do 10 times better than kind of like someone else, I prefer to let them do it if they're excited. So that's usually how I pick and choose kind of like the different things to work on. So as a CEO, I'm like, okay, what are some of the most impactful things that I can do and that nobody else can do? And then also, something really important in our culture at Hugging Face is the decentralized culture and the freedom culture. Kind of like empowers us to really be driven not only by my own excitement, but also by anyone else's excitement about things. So a lot of the times, like when we release new things, people like look at it and are like trying to understand the strategic relevancy
like
for
the
it.
logic.
And
you basically look at the thing and then you work backwards and try to create the logic for taking an action or making some move.
Basically, we follow people's excitement. So sometimes we release things and people are like, okay, strategically, how does it make sense for Hugging Face? And I reply, John got excited about it and built it. That's why.
That's the logic.
That's the logic behind it. And I always try to kind of like foster that. I think the way we hire at Hugging Face is a bit unusual in the sense that we usually don't hire for specific kind of like job description or job position. We try to find people who are smart, kind of like excited and aligned by our vision and our mission, right? And usually we bring them in and tell them to work on what they're excited about, right? And that's worked really well because they, really do things that are meaningful to them. They get extremely motivated, right? They become really owners themselves of their projects, and end up having kind of like a tremendous impact for Hugging Face. Whereas I feel like if we were more working the other way around, in a sense, starting from the task or starting from the mission, starting from the job position, and then trying to find someone who would fit this position and tell them you should do that.
A little bit like creating the schedule.
Yeah, I think that wouldn't work as well. So that's been also kind of like an interesting learning for us, giving really people the freedom, the ownership, the structure for them to work on what they're excited about. And usually good things come out of that.
Charlie Munger has this line where he's like, you should follow your natural drift. I think with something like that, I don't think you start it by working backwards and saying, here's a huge business and we're going to, work backwards and create this little guy. Let's say in April this year, you said that you acquired a company and you were going to build some version of this. How did you kind of go from that to actually find, creating something that you were excited to get out into the world and actually ship?
Yeah, so even the acquisition started from the excitement from the team we were acquiring, the Poland team, who were excited about joining Hugging Face, right, and building with us. And then after, really kind of like following their thinking, right, because they were the experts. They've been working on robotics for almost 10 years. When we acquired them, they were one of the few teams that were actually shipping humanoid robots. For example, now we're shipping humanoid robots to OpenAI, to DeepMind, to research labs like this. And they were basically, told us after we acquired them, okay, I think that would be really exciting to work on for the AI builders. And so I just said yes. A big part of my job as a CEO, actually, as in a structure in a company like Hugging Face, is really just to say yes and just kind of like empower people and kind of like support them and kind of like point them towards kind of like some directions that I think can help increase their impact. Remove some of their fears,
like the
right?
roadblocks, or
yeah, like for example, what I do a lot is to reassure people on their ability to release earlier than what they think they should do, right? I think the natural tendency for something like this would have been to release it next year, because there's always this thing like, okay, we need to work on this is not ready, we need to make progress on that. And so the natural tendency is for people to delay launch versus in an organization like Hugging Face, we're always trying to say, okay, you don't need to be ready to launch, right? Like you just have to have kind of like a minimum viable product, something that is not gonna completely break, and set the right expectations, right? Don't tell people that it's gonna be perfect from day one, that it's gonna be AGI from day one, right? But instead tell them that it's an imperfect first version, and then release it and let the people play with it and experiment with it. So a big part of my job is just to reassure and build confidence from the team members that they can release things quickly with the community, experiment and build one step at a time.
I was thinking about this recently, where I kind of think that the founder's job in a lot of ways is to basically live with uncertainty, and everyone else in the world pretty much doesn't want to live with uncertainty. They want to like have as much, I wouldn't say walls, but I would say like concreteness, in what they're doing. For you, how are you kind of like helping your teams live with uncertainty and basically ship faster?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it is kind of like making feel comfortable with mistakes and fucks up, right? Like the reason I think most people delay things is because they're afraid of the repercussions of making a mistake, right? It feels uncomfortable, kind of like releasing something or doing something, and you make a mistake, and someone is telling you, man, you're done. Like
if they're laughing at the
mistake.
robot, they're laughing directly at you, kind of sort of situation.
Yeah. And when you release early, it happens all the time. So it's just making them comfortable with that. It happens all the time. Like I was telling you the early story of Thomas releasing, PyTorch pre-trained birds, right? He said he would start working on it on Friday, and he released on Monday, right? He worked on it all weekend. And the funny story is that I think for 2 days, it wasn't working at all. It was kind of like, I don't remember.
On the Monday and Tuesday, it just didn't work.
I don't remember exactly what was the problem, but it was not working at all, right? And so most people would have been like, scared and kind of like stressed, because we released something that wasn't working. But, I think we have a high tolerance for things like that. And at the time, Thomas had the best reaction, which was, oh, it's not working because there are some problems, but people seem excited about it, right? We validated that because people are retweeting, liking the tweet. So now I'm gonna fix these problems, be transparent with people. And 2 days later, it was fixed, and people started using it, and it was great. Same for Richie Mini. I'm sure when we start shipping bigger batches, so we hope to ship around 4,000 of them before the end of the year. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of problems, right? And I apologize in advance to users, to beta testers, to AI builders. There are going to be a lot of problems. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of bugs. But we'll work hard with the community to fix them as fast as possible, to improve them, to learn with them. That's usually the way to approach things. And I feel like that's the biggest thing for me that helps people not delay too much doing things or releasing things. It's just making them more comfortable with mistakes, failures, problems.
I think a lot of the companies that have tried to create AI products today and over the past couple of years have kind of tried to create the iPhone 15 to start. And it's this fully fleshed out, where they at least promise and say that it's this fully fleshed out thing that really works. And then when users actually buy it and they try it, it's like, oh, this doesn't, it's not iPhone 15. It may be iPhone 1 or maybe even the iPod before that. And with something like this, I think with your company in particular, because it's got this open source tinkering culture, I think people that are adopting the thing that you buy may have a different sort of expectation set than another company. How do you kind of think about setting expectations for a product that you're going to release and kind of letting people know things aren't going to go perfectly and it's not meant to, and that's the entire objective of releasing quickly?
I feel like expectations are a very big problem for AI. Specifically because of the term itself, like AI, and the fact that it's kind of like a new technology with new capabilities. It's really easy to, overhype and oversell what you're building. And I think some companies, some organizations, some people fall into this trap. Which is a problem because I think it creates fears from people. Now I think a lot of people think about AI and think about sci-fi scenarios, Robocop, Terminator, all these kind of like crazy doomsday scenarios created by AI. Versus kind of like, I think how we perceiving this technology for us at Hugging Face is more kind of like a new generation of software, right? Like Andrej Karpathy talked about software 2.0 as a way to describe AI, which I think is a much more down to earth, much more realistic way to approach AI, and something that people can understand better. AI is not this technology black box that, just a few people are going to build and dominate the world. It's more kind of like a new paradigm for building, right? A new way of creating software that everyone can use, everyone can be a part of. And that is going to solve like a lot of different challenges, a lot of different problems that we have, that is going to create a whole set of new opportunities in a lot of different domains, right? Something interesting on Hugging Face, as mentioning, we have 11 million AI builders now using the platform. The fastest growing domains for AI on Hugging Face is not text anymore, right? A lot of people are talking about ChatGPT, about kind of like chatbots and text. But the domains that are growing the fastest on Hugging Face are audio, video, image, biology, chemistry. So I think what we're seeing is that AI is going to be applied to every single domain, just like software has been applied to every single domain, and become some sort of kind of like a new paradigm, new foundations for us humans to build a lot of things that are solving our problems, creating some new opportunities and new capabilities. So I think when you present AI like this, it's closer to the reality of the technology. It removes some of the fears from people. It moves them from kind of like a default of using the technology to more kind of like becoming actors, becoming builders, and trying to do things themselves, which in the long term will be much better for the field.
can you basically spend some time talking about like why your mission is open source, and especially in today's world with AI models where the biggest companies are spending billions of dollars on a single model, why open source matters so much?
Yeah. So in AI, there are very strong natural tendencies for concentration of power, concentration of capabilities, and concentration of wealth, right? You mentioned kind of like compute as some kind of like defining impact. Talent, of course, is super important, and money is really important in AI. And so I think something that we should be scared about is to end up in a world where only a few companies are able to do AI. The way to think about it is like, how would the world be if only a few companies were able to be doing and building software, right? I think that would be a very scary, dystopian, dangerous world. And so what we always felt like with Hugging Face is that we need to fight this very strong incentives and risks of concentration of power.
I have no idea how much like some of the top labs are spending to lobby in Washington. I imagine it's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. And, even kind of like the domination of the big tech companies already, and kind of like their ability to pour hundreds of billions of dollars onto AI makes it kind of like difficult for anyone to compete with them, right? And so we believe at Hugging Face that open source, right, which is basically the ability to share models, to share data sets openly for free to anyone, is a way to fight these natural tendencies. Because basically when companies or developers or organizations do that, they give everyone kind of like the foundations to be able to build themselves AI products, AI features, AI organizations, and fight these natural tendencies of concentration of power. And thanks to open source, we believe that you can create a world where not just a few organizations are able to build and dominate AI, but really any organization, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of little tech, of startups, of nonprofits, of governments, of individuals should be able to build with AI. And the only way to do that is thanks to open source, because you can't build AI and be competitive in AI starting from scratch, right? You need the help of open source models that you use as a base, open source data sets, and open source tools, so that you don't have to rebuild basically everything.
I remember Dario Amodei from Anthropic saying that if you look at the company as a whole, it may be, Anthropic may be losing money, but then if you look at like a model in particular, they invest $2 billion and they get $20 billion out of that, or 200 million and they get $2 billion. And I think in that type of world, if you look at the new models that you're talking about, where it's like these smaller models, but they're specific, to like biology or chemistry or robotics or so on, it's almost like little mini startups. Like each model is almost like a startup, and you're able, like velocity of iteration and shipping can be different on this small thing. How do you kind of see that evolving?
Yeah, I agree. What we're seeing with Hugging Face is when you have kind of like smaller customized models, there are like a bunch of advantages. It's easier, as you mentioned, to iterate on, to experiment with, because it's a smaller model. You understand better the limitations, what it can do, what it can't do. It's usually faster to run, right? It's usually cheaper to run.
It doesn't have a bunch of fluff.
Exactly, yeah. It's like this idea that maybe you need a very large generalist models to do ChatGPT, right? To try to answer all the questions in the world. But when you're doing a banking customer support chatbots, you don't really need that to tell you the meaning of life, right? You just need it to tell you about your accounts, tell you about some of the problems you're encountering. And so you can use kind of like a smaller, cheaper, more specialized model that usually most of the time is going to be better at answering your specific questions. So ultimately, we envision kind of like a world and a field where you don't have just a few big generalist models that everyone is using, but instead you have kind of like millions of smaller, specialized, customized models that are solving all kind of like individual problems, individual use cases, very similar to what happened for software, right? If you think of it, you could believe that a bigger code base is better, and maybe that there's gonna be like a general gigantic code base to rule them all, right? But this is not what happened. What happened is that every single company, every single organization is writing their own code, right? And there are millions of different code bases. Everyone is building their own. So something that we're thinking that is going to happen is similar for AI, where you're going to have a world where every organization has their own kind of like customized, specialized models based on open source, right? Open source is kind of like the foundation, the base, and everyone is going to have their own specific customized models.
You mentioned that the main like selling point for regulation is basically just fear. Is the reason that you made that robot kind of like this friendly, joyful thing? Is that kind of to fight fear?
Yeah, I think we've really seen the beauty of transparency in AI. I think a lot of the regulators, but also people in general, are scared by black boxes. When you have a system that you don't understand, it creates more fear versus when you can see behind the scene, when you can kind of like see how it works, understand how it works. It removes a lot of these fears. Or it kind of like directs your fears to something that is actually like a rational, good fear. I don't think we're saying that AI is perfect and doesn't have any risk or any challenges, right? But once you have transparency in the systems, I think you can focus on some of the challenges that are more real, right? So for example, when you look at how the models are built and what they can do, for example, you realize that a lot of them have biases, right? We talked a lot about the chatbot biases. If you remember, I think it was Gemini who had a lot of like woke biases.
Couldn't make the like founding fathers not black.
Exactly. These are real problems, right? And it's not like sci-fi Terminator problems, but it's actual problems that you need to solve and fix now. So I think transparency is really important for AI. I think the more transparent you can be, the better people are going to be to solve some of the challenges and create more opportunities. So that's also one of the big values of open source for AI.
This is a little bit of a hypothetical, but I think one of my top 3 or 4 favorite founders is Johnny Rockefeller. And imagine him as like an 18-year-old or 19-year-old today. What do you think, like what company would he be building?
It would be an AI builder, for sure, right? We talk a lot about this differentiation between an AI user, right, which would be someone building maybe with APIs or with kind of like black box AI, versus an AI builder, so more someone who can train model, optimize model, and own models themselves. If I were to start myself a new company right now, I would focus on AI for biology, AI for chemistry. We're seeing a lot of new models appearing on Hugging Face on these domains. Things like cell predictions, molecule predictions. I think these are underinvested topics where you are going to see a lot of new applications in the next few years, especially because we're starting to see more and more progress on time series for AI. So it's kind of like the application for AI for more like time series and probabilities rather than text. And I feel like some of the application of that plus application of AI for text could unleash some new capabilities there. So I wish more people were working on these topics. Like chatbots are fun. They're nice. Text AI are fun. But so many people are working on that. Most of the attention of the media is focused on that, probably too much, right? And it would be good to start focusing on other domains. I got the question, I think it was last week, on the topic of AI bubble, right? Are we on an AI bubble? And I answered that probably in a LLM bubble, right? People are talking a lot about LLMs, about chatbots. That's where most of the money is going towards. Whereas, in my opinion, we can start focusing on other domains in AI like biology, chemistry, time series, images, videos, audio. And on these topics, we're just scratching the surface of what we can do. So in that sense, we're super early in AI.
I remember hearing, I think Sam Altman talked about real trends versus fake trends. And like he got asked if they were in a bubble, I think in like 2015 and, or if startups were in a bubble. And I remember the way that he described how he thought about it was basically like a real trend is something like the iPhone 1, where maybe it's a small, it's an imperfect product and, but the early adopters are just constantly using it. Like the average time per day was like 3 hours or something per day on these new devices. Whereas a fake trend is like VR and AR, where most of the people, like the early adopters, they'd put it on and wear it for 5 or 6 hours the first day, and then 2 or 3 hours the next day. And then by the third week, it's basically just sitting on the shelf and collecting dust. And I think, with this sort of thing, when people say, like, are we in an AI bubble? When I think Gavin Baker was talking about how much the GPUs are like utilized. And it's like, there is no quiet GPU. They're all humming. And so probably not. There's like lots of value being created here.
For me, it's interesting because being in AI for some time now, we could see kind of like the evolution. And usually I define hype between kind of like with the gap between kind of like perception and usage in a way. And it felt like for us being kind of like the platform for AI builders from kind of like when we started Hugging Face to pre-ChatGPT, AI was very much underhyped because we were already starting to see some usage. For example, AI was used for search engines, right? You were already starting to see some AI in Google. For example, AI was used for social media, right? With like recommender systems. AI was used for the early innings of self-driving cars, for your home assistant. So even pre-ChatGPT, there was already kind of like some decent kind of like usage
Real
of
engagement.
AI, but people weren't really talking about it that much. It was kind of like under the radar. It was kind of niche. There wasn't so many AI startups. Nobody like outside of our core user base, investors, media, nobody knew Hugging Face at the time, right? And then ChatGPT came out, and there was some sort of kind of like a catch up, right? Investors, media, people who are not in the field, they started to realize, thanks to ChatGPT, that AI was going to be big and transformative. And so we got into some sort of an adjustment where, in my opinion, perception aligns with kind of like underlying usage. And that's kind of like where we are today, right? So people weren't really in the field before, or were not kind of like seeing all the usage that AI is getting today, just by kind of like the speed of change of perception in AI might be like, oh, there's definitely a bubble, because 2 years ago I wasn't hearing about AI, and now that's everything I'm hearing about. They're a bit misled by that, but in general, I think it was just catch up.
I don't know how many startups have been created in the past 2 or 3 years. There's going to be a lot of startups that don't end up being super valuable, and that's fine, but that's just like part of the creative destruction process of people trying things out.
There's probably going to be more startups failing in the AI paradigm than in the software paradigm, and that's completely fine.
That just means there's more excitement.
Exactly. Yeah.
People trying things.
And also kind of like more novelty, right? I think what's really interesting with AI is that because it's a new paradigm, it throws kind of like a lot of the playbooks out of the window, right? It's almost like we've had this cycle where we started to do software maybe, like 20 years ago, 25 years ago, something like that. And over time, the field like matured, right? And became more sophisticated. And so you started to really have these playbooks, right? Like the SaaS playbook, the lean startup playbook. You have a lot of kind of like best practices that investors are sharing and pushing because you had some kind of like learning, right? From the paradigm of building software staying kind of like relatively similar for a long period of time, right? Now we're in a new paradigm, right? AI. And I see a lot of people making mistakes by trying to apply exactly the same playbook that they've seen in software to AI, versus kind of like what, in my opinion, is a better way to approach it, is to completely unlearn, like throw in the trash everything you've learned before, all the playbooks that you've learned before, and start new and think, okay, now in the AI era, in the AI paradigm, how do I build a startup? It's probably going to be very different than how you were building software, traditional software startups. But that's part of the fun too. You get to reinvent, try new things, and start from scratch instead of kind of like using some of the playbooks of the past.
I remember a line from Sam Altman where he said, the first time you're building a company and you experience what can be described as like a company killing crisis, it feels like the world's falling apart and everything's ending. But then you make it through, and by the 7th time, you experience the company killing crisis. You're kind of like, well, I made it through the first 6, so this is probably no different. What was the first time during Hugging Face's journey where you were like, oh my God, are we going to die?
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably when kind of like other people released kind of like similar things to us, right? I was mentioning a little bit Google releasing TensorFlow Hub, which was kind of like a direct competitor to what we were doing. Of course, when you have a massive company like Google with massive resources, massive teams, kind of like releasing something similar to what you were doing, it's an intense moment of stress, of fear.
What did you do in that moment?
I think we what we've been really good at is not rush too much at the time, because I think it's easy to panic in a way and kind of like damage some of the things that you've built, for example, the culture or
the whole reputation takes like 30 years to build it, 5 minutes to ruin it.
So usually we try to first take our time, not rush things. And then the approach that we've always taken, which has served us quite well, is to approach even these moments as an opportunity to collaborate rather than to compete. And so what we did, for example, with TensorFlow Hub, instead of being like, oh, fuck, we're gonna have to compete, we're gonna try to kill them, we actually reached out to them and talked particularly to a guy named François Chollet, who was one of the really most prominent people in the field of AI that was at Google at the time, and started collaborating with them actually and building some integrations between TensorFlow Hub and the Hugging Face Hub. And that served us really well, because ultimately we found a way for some of the initiatives from Google to be useful, especially to people, for example, working at Google, so using more like Google-centric tools, but at the same time also driving a lot of these users to use both their products and what we have to offer. So a bit counterintuitive, but in most of these cases we ended up collaborating with these things,
with the competitors,
more than kind of like compete frontally. It's a bit specific to us, to our culture, to what the kind of things we're doing, but that worked quite well for us.
In August last year, Pavel Durov flew to France, and he gets off the plane and he's immediately arrested and under some false pretenses, and he's taken to jail and put in prison. And then I think a couple days later he's released, but now he's basically has to fly back to France and see a judge every 2 weeks, and has for the past almost year or more now. I think what we have in America is really special for startups and entrepreneurship. How do you feel about France, and what would you like to see happen there? Yeah.
Well, I think for tech in France, there's been some progress in the past few years, especially because I think it's gotten kind of it's gotten closer to some of the best practices in the US and the rest of the world. So right now there are more kind of American VCs investing in startups based in France. You have more French founders moving to the US, going to YC, sometimes going back to France. France has also this crazy advantage of producing kind of really, really good mathematicians and engineers. I think you were talking about it with Sean the other day. My co-founders are a good example of that. They both went to Polytechnique, some of the best kind of people of their generation in math, because the whole training, the whole education system is really based on math. So it produces really good AI engineers. And actually, if you look at most of the AI companies and big tech companies, there are always kind of some French people and some kind of AI position. There's Yann Lequin, for example, is famous from Meta, is a good example of that. So I think France has a lot of advantages. Obviously, kind of the political situation is a bit complicated right now, but I think if they can get that under control, I think they would have a way to kind of have an impact on the field in general. Historically, there's been kind of good initiatives on open source. There's a company called Mistral that is French, that has been really pushing the field for open source, releasing good open source models. So there are a lot of opportunities, and I hope that in the long run they really can contribute to the field. In general, the same way, I talk about how you should find ways to decentralize, distribute AI capabilities inside countries with AI builders. I think internationally that's really important too. I feel not just one country should be able to create AI and build AI. I think we'd be better off if any country in the world can really contribute to the field and really become AI builders. There's this interesting, to some people, kind of like scary trend of a lot of the best open source models in AI now coming out of China.
Yep.
Just because they've been.
That's kind of surprising too, because I remember, like, I believe that the common wisdom was, if the US open sources, like, China will get all that great stuff, but then they won't open source their models. And what's ended up actually happening is, like, China's open sourcing all of their models, and the US is keeping, closed source.
Yeah. And it's super surprising, because if you look at the early days of AI, if you look at, 2016 to 2022, AI in the US was extremely open. Like you look at, I was mentioning BERT. If you look at attention is all you need, transformers, right? The T is like the T in ChatGPT, right? All of these were open source. And in many ways, kind of like the fact that it was open source, open science, allowed really kind of like the ecosystem to thrive and to flourish and to get to where we are, right? Like, if Google didn't open source transformers, OpenAI couldn't have built ChatGPT based on that, right? And so it created this kind of like faster building on top of each other, emulation in the open, that really allowed the US to dominate AI, right? But something that happened in, around 2022, something like that, for some reason, is I feel like people started to be a little bit scared about open source. People started to make more money from AI, and so things became more closed
and kind of pull up the ladder.
Yeah, things became more closed in the US, right? And in reaction, or maybe at the same time, in China, they became much more open and started to actually contribute more in terms of open science, open source.
Do you know why that happened?
So, I mean, if you look at China in general, they've always been quite kind of like focused on open source in general. It's not so known, but they've always been kind of like big contributors to open source. I think as a way to contribute from outside China. I think the incentives are a little bit different than in the US, which allows more players to share in open source. But I think it intensified progressively as they've been seeing kind of like the potential and the impact of it, right? I remember maybe 2 years ago, we already had kind of like quite a lot of Chinese organizations, Chinese researchers sharing models on Hugging Face that weren't getting a lot of visibility and traction, but progressively people started to notice. And now whenever there's a good model released from China on Hugging Face, the impact is massive, right? You've seen that with DeepSeek, for example. DeepSeek has over 100,000 followers on Hugging Face now. And so by now, they've kind of like really understood that when you release in open source as a startup, as an organization, or even as a country, you can have kind of like a massive impact, right? And so it reinforces their motivation and their excitement to keep doing so. And the emulation, right? We went from a few organizations sharing in open source to now we probably have like 30, 40, 50 really good organizations, companies in China sharing really good models, not only for text, but for audio, video, image, really kind of like a lot of different domains. So I hope that the US will get back to its initial philosophy of like open source and open science. We're starting to see some progress in that direction. Elon Musk and XAI open sourced the previous generation of Grok a few weeks ago on Hugging Face.
Was that Grok 3?
Grok 3, yeah, on Hugging Face, which is amazing. OpenAI released their first open source LLM in a while on Hugging Face last summer, GPT-OSS, which is seeing a lot of usage, a lot of adoption from AI builders. You have organizations like Allen AI, which is not only releasing open source models, but also open source data sets. So how the models are trained and scripts on like how they trained their models. So really fully open source. You have NVIDIA that is doing more and more open source. They released, I think it's on average in the past year, over one new model or data set per day. So I think it's over 400 models and data sets that they released in the past year. So you're starting to have kind of like more organizations in the US doing open source. The US administration is extremely supportive of open source. It's something that is amazing because it wasn't really the case with the previous administration. But they did an executive order and kind of like an AI plan where the third point of the AI action plan was to kind of like foster more open weights and more open data sets. So you have really great people in the administration, like Sriram was like at Andreessen before.
Leading the charge on that.
Pushing for that, and this is really important, really great for the field. So hopefully we can get back to a world where the US is doing more open source AI, which is very important because if it's not happening, it's kind of like a bit weird and scary to think that a lot of the current American startups, American companies, American nonprofit, academic, American kind of like science organizations could be built on Chinese foundations, right? Which is what's happening right now. A partner from Andreessen said recently that a lot of their portfolio companies right now that are building AI are building on top of Chinese models, Chinese open source models, which is obviously a risk.
American dynamism built on top of Chinese models.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is a problem because if you think, for example, in terms of biases, right? A lot of the biases, cultural biases, are embedded into the open source foundations, right? So it means that the products that American companies are going to build are going to integrate some of these biases. If you think of control, right, it creates kind of like more control for China because of this. And then if you also think about the development of the field in general, the faster the foundations evolve, grow, improve, the faster the whole field evolves, right? So now that China is starting to dominate in open source AI, it wouldn't be crazy to think that maybe in a few months, they're going to start to dominate in AI in general, right? Because it accelerates the velocity of progress. So that's a very important topic for me. I think the US should start to invest more in open source AI, really incentivize open source models, open source data sets to kind of like change the current trends.
If you look at something like robotics, I imagine that you kind of get a early view on the trends in the world. And I know there's, a bunch of companies that have raised a huge amount of money to build humanoid robotics. But I think there's also like a lot of the smartest people that I know in AI are thinking about building robotics companies that don't necessarily run around the human form factor. What are you seeing there? How do you think it's going to evolve?
Well, I think with the early stages for robotics AI, with a couple of like really encouraging trends, right? I think it's much easier than before to build really good hardware for robotics to make it much more affordable than it used to be for multiple reasons. And it's becoming easier and easier to have kind of like great software and great AI capabilities for this hardware. So you have this confluence of kind of like better hardware and better software that I think put together is going to kind of like enable a completely new paradigm for robotics, right? One of the challenges is that at this early stage, a lot of the initiatives are siloed. So it's almost like every robotics lab is creating their own kind of like software, hardware stack that is completely different than the one of their neighbors. And so there isn't really kind of like the collaboration that you see in the rest of AI right now, which slows down the field quite a lot. So that's one of the reasons why at Hugging Face we're trying to push for more open source, for more sharing, for more standards, best practices. We have this library called Le Robot, which has become one of the most popular robotics library for people to kind of like enable new data sets, new models for any sort of hardware. I think that kind of initiatives could really unlock faster progress for robotics, right? Like if everyone starts to collaborate with each other, share a little bit of their learning, I think that the field is gonna accelerate, and that could lead to like the chat GPT moment for robotics, which was the produce of collaboration of a lot of people in AI. That's what we hope for in robotics.
Final question. What's the hardest thing you've overcome?
That's a good question. Hardest. There are always kind of like hard things for founders, for entrepreneurs in startup journey. Sometimes people idealize things and thinks it's all glamour, all fun, which is not true, right? The things that impact me the most personally are more like people things, right? So when we have kind of like team members that we've worked with for a year, 2 years, 5 years, sometimes even more, who decide to go on to a different challenge, to start their own company and kind of like leave a little bit the Hugging Face family or the Hugging Face organization. This is always a tough thing for me. I've learned a little bit to accept that, right? Especially because I think I've seen a lot of people that have gone on to build really cool stuff outside of Hugging Face and sometimes contributing to Hugging Face from the outside and staying in touch and staying connected, because the AI world is obviously small and everyone is always collaborating. But for me personally, as a founder, that's that hardest things, when people have to leave or when we have to let go people. That's kind of like the most challenging part for me.